close your eyes and imagine the world as it was thousands of years ago, when the boundary between day and night felt like the edge between safety and terror, when every shadow could conceal something ancient and hungry, waiting. In those times, when fire was humanity's only companion against the vast darkness, our ancestors gathered around flickering flames and whispered stories that would survive millennia. Tales of creatures so terrifying that they still send shivers down our spines today. These were not mere stories told for entertainment, though they certainly entertained. These were the myths that helped our forebears make sense of a world filled with inexplicable dangers, sudden deaths, and forces beyond human control. When lightning split the sky, when plagues swept through villages, when children disappeared in the night, these ancient peoples created monsters to give shape to their fears, to transform the formless dread of the unknown into something they could name, describe, and perhaps eventually overcome. Tonight, we embark on a journey through the shadowed corridors of human imagination, where the most terrifying creatures ever conceived by mortal minds await us in the darkness. We will walk softly through the ruins of ancient temples, descend into forgotten underworlds, and stand before beings whose very existence challenges our understanding of what is possible in this world and the next. But do not be afraid, for you are safe here in this moment, wrapped in the comfort of modern understanding, protected by the knowledge that these creatures exist only in the realm of story and symbol. Yet, as we explore their origins, their meanings, and their enduring power over the human psyche, you may find that they reveal truths about ourselves that are more real than any physical form they might have taken. The monsters we will encounter tonight are not random creations born from idle fancy. Each one represents something profound about the human condition, something that transcends the particular culture that birthed it. The serpent that devours its own tail, the hybrid beast that combines the most feared aspects of multiple animals, the guardian of the dead who judges the worthiness of souls. These are universal symbols that speak to fears and hopes that have remained constant throughout human history. As we begin this exploration, let yourself sink deeper into comfort. Allow your breathing to slow and deepen. For the stories we are about to share are meant to be experienced in that liminal space between waking and sleeping, where the rational mind relaxes its grip and allows older, deeper forms of knowing to emerge. In this space, monsters are not enemies to be defeated, but teachers to be understood, mirrors that reflect back to us the depths of our own psyche. The ancient Greeks had a word, catharsis, which described the purification of emotion through art. The way that experiencing fear or pity in a safe context could cleanse the soul of these same emotions in daily life. The monsters of mythology serve this same function, allowing us to confront our deepest terrors in a controlled environment, to face death, chaos, and the unknown through the safety of narrative distance. Think of the storytellers who first gave voice to these creatures, sitting around fires, much like the one you might imagine flickering before us now. Their faces illuminated by dancing flames as they spoke of things that lurked beyond the circle of light. These were not mere entertainers, but shamans, wisdom keepers, psychologists before psychology had a name, who understood that the human mind needs monsters to remain whole, needs to acknowledge the darkness in order to fully appreciate the light. Each culture we will visit tonight developed its own unique pantheon of terrors, shaped by the particular challenges and fears of their environment. The seafaring Greeks imagined monsters emerging from the wind-dark depths of the Mediterranean, while the Norse, surrounded by harsh winters and unpredictable seasons, conceived of beasts that embodied the end of the world itself. The Egyptians, obsessed with death and the afterlife, populated their underworld with creatures that judged and devoured souls, while the Mesopotamians, vulnerable to floods and famines, created demons that personified disease and misfortune. Yet despite these cultural differences, certain themes emerge again and again across time and geography. The serpent appears in mythologies worldwide, sometimes as a symbol of wisdom, sometimes as an agent of chaos, but always as a representation of the primal, the instinctual, the aspects of existence that cannot be tamed by human reason. Hybrid creatures, part animal and part human, appear in every mythology, representing the thin boundary between civilization and wildness, the constant threat that the careful structures of human society might collapse back into something more primitive and dangerous. As we prepare to meet these ancient terrors face to face, remember that you are not alone in this journey. Countless generations before us have walked this same path, have faced these same fears, and have found in the confrontation not destruction, but transformation. The monsters that once haunted their dreams have become for us sources of fascination, inspiration, and ultimately understanding. The fire burns low now, and the shadows grow longer, stretching toward us like fingers reaching out from the past. Can you hear them, the whispers of ancient voices calling to us across the centuries, inviting us to step beyond the familiar boundaries of our modern world and into realms where anything is possible, where terror and beauty dance together in an eternal embrace? Let us begin our descent into the darkness, secure in the knowledge that no matter how deep we travel into these shadowed realms, we carry with us the light of consciousness, the flame of curiosity that has always driven humanity to seek understanding even in the face of the unknown. The monsters are waiting, patient as they have always been, ready to reveal their secrets to those brave enough to listen with both fear and wonder in their hearts. The monsters of ancient Greece. The Mediterranean sun sets behind us now as we find ourselves standing on the rocky shores of ancient Greece, where white-capped waves crash against marble cliffs and the air carries the scent of olive groves and wild thyme. It was here, in this landscape of stunning beauty and sudden danger, that some of humanity's most enduring monsters first took shape in the collective imagination. Born from the fertile minds of poets and storytellers who understood that true terror comes not from the unknown alone, but from the corruption of the familiar. In the depths of the Aegean Sea, where sunlight fades to an eternal blue-black darkness, there lived a creature whose very existence challenged the Greek understanding of natural order. The Hydra, offspring of the primordial monsters, Typhon and Echidna, was no ordinary serpent, but a writhing mass of regenerating heads that grew back doubled each time one was severed, a living embodiment of the futility of violence against nature's most persistent forces. Picture this beast rising from the poisonous marshes of Lerna, its multiple heads swaying hypnotically in the fetid air, each mouth dripping with venom, so potent that even its breath could kill a mortal man. The Hydra represented something that the Greeks, with their love of order and reason, found particularly disturbing. The idea that some problems cannot be solved through direct action, that sometimes the very attempt to destroy an evil only makes it stronger. When Heracles faced this creature as part of his 12 labors, he discovered that brute strength alone could not prevail. that victory required not just courage but cunning, not just the sword but the understanding that some battles must be fought with fire rather than blade. Some enemies must be cauterized rather than simply cut down. Yet the Hydra's terror went deeper than its physical form, for it embodied the fear of the infinite, the dread that lurks in every person's heart when they realize that some struggles have no clear end, that the problems we face may multiply faster than we can solve them. In our own lives, we all have Hydras, challenges that seem to spawn new difficulties each time we think we have overcome them, anxieties that grow back stronger each time we try to cut them away. From the toxic swamps, where the Hydra dwelt, our path leads us through twisted olive groves to a cave that no Greek would approach without trembling, for here lived Medusa, the most famous of the three Gorgon sisters, whose very gaze could turn a living being to stone. Once, it is said, she was beautiful beyond compare, a priestess in Athena's temple whose golden hair caught the light like spun sunbeams. But the gods are jealous of mortal beauty, and their punishments often exceed the crimes that provoke them. Imagine Medusa in her transformed state, her once lovely hair now a nest of writhing serpents, each one alive and aware, their eyes glittering with malevolent intelligence as they whisper secrets that no mortal should hear. Her face, still hauntingly beautiful despite its curse, carries the weight of infinite sorrow, for she is both monster and victim predator, and prey condemned to kill everyone who looks upon her, while remaining forever isolated in her cave of stone statues, each one a person who approached seeking either to destroy her or simply gazed too long in fascination. The Greeks understood that Medusa represented the dangerous power of the feminine, the creative force turned destructive, beauty transformed into horror through the cruelty of fate. But she also embodied a deeper fear, the terror of being seen too clearly, of having one's true nature exposed and found wanting. Her gaze that turns flesh to stone is a metaphor for the paralysis that comes when we are truly seen, truly known, when all our carefully constructed masks are stripped away and we stand naked before the judgment of another. Even in death, Medusa's power remained undiminished, for from her severed neck sprang Pegasus, the winged horse that could soar above earthly limitations. A reminder that even from the most terrible transformations, something beautiful and transcendent can emerge. Her head, still potent with its petrifying power, became a weapon and a shield, protecting those who carried it, while serving as an eternal reminder that the most dangerous monsters are often those who were once innocent, transformed by forces beyond their control. In the labyrinthine passages beneath the palace of Crete, there waits a creature born of divine punishment and human hubris. The Minotaur, with the body of a man and the head of a bull, paces endlessly through corridors that lead nowhere. Fed on the blood of Athenian youth, sent as tribute to appease King Minos's wrath. This beast, born from Queen Possipo's unnatural union with a white bull, represents the consequences of unchecked desire and the monsters that emerge when natural boundaries are transgressed. The labyrinth itself becomes as much a character as the monster it contains, its twisting passages reflecting the convolutions of guilt and shame that trap us in cycles of destructive behavior. The young Athenians, sent into this maze, knew they were walking toward almost certain death, yet they walked nonetheless, for sometimes facing the monster is the only way to end its reign of terror, even if the price is our own destruction. When Theseus descended into this underworld of stone and shadow, following the thread that Ariadne had given him, He carried with him not just a sword, but the hope that even the most complex problems have solutions, that even the most confusing situations can be navigated with the right guidance and enough determination. The thread represents the thin line that connects us to safety when we venture into the darkest parts of ourselves. The wisdom of those who love us enough to help us find our way back to the light. But perhaps no Greek monster captures the essential nature of chaos quite like the Chimera, a creature so impossible that it seems to have been assembled from nightmares rather than nature. Picture this beast stalking through the mountains of Lycia, its lion's body rippling with power, its goat's head rising from its back like a second consciousness, and its serpent's tail writhing with a mind of its own, breathing fire that turns the very stones to glass and leaves the air shimmering with heat. The Chimera represents the fear of the hybrid, the unnatural combination, the thing that should not exist but does anyway. It is evolution run mad, nature rebelling against its own rules, a creature that embodies multiple forms of death in a single body. The lion brings the terror of the hunt, the goat, the unpredictability of the wild, and the serpent, the ancient fear of the venomous, the creature that kills, not with claws or teeth, but with poison that corrupts from within. Yet there is something almost tragic about the Chimera, for it is a creature at war with itself, pulled in different directions by its competing natures, never able to find peace or unity. In this way, it reflects the human condition more closely than we might care to admit. For are we not all hybrid creatures of a sort, torn between our animal instincts and our rational minds, between our desire for safety and our hunger for adventure, between the parts of ourselves that want to create and those that are drawn to destruction? These Greek monsters, born in an age when the line between myth and reality was gossamer thin, continue to haunt our imaginations, because they represent truths about existence that transcend any particular time or place. They remind us that the world is not always logical, that nature sometimes produces things that challenge our understanding, and that the most terrifying monsters are often those that reflect back to us aspects of ourselves that we would rather not acknowledge. As the Mediterranean night deepens around us, and the stars appear like ancient eyes watching from the darkness above, we can almost hear the echo of these creatures moving through the shadows, not as enemies to be feared, but as teachers who show us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to continue in spite of it. That wisdom comes not from avoiding the darkness, but from learning to navigate it with grace and understanding. The olive trees rustle in the night wind, and somewhere in the distance, we hear the sound of waves against stone, eternal and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the earth itself, reminding us that these stories have endured, because they speak to something essential in the human experience, something that remains constant even as civilizations rise and fall, like waves upon an endless shore. Norse beasts of the end times. The warm Mediterranean breeze fades behind us as we journey northward, following paths that lead through increasingly wild and desolate landscapes where the sun hangs low on the horizon, even at midday, and the very air seems to whisper of endings yet to come. We find ourselves now in the realm of the Norse, where fjords cut deep into ancient stone and the aurora borealis dances across skies that stretch endlessly into darkness, a land where the myths speak not of individual monsters, but of cosmic beasts whose very existence threatens the foundations of reality itself. Here, in this world of ice and iron, where survival depends on strength and cunning in equal measure, The ancient storytellers conceived of creatures so vast and terrible that they could bring about the death of gods themselves. These are monsters, born not from human fears alone, but from the deeper dread that even the mightiest powers must eventually face their twilight. That every story, no matter how grand, must eventually reach its conclusion. In the depths of an iron-bound forest where no sunlight penetrates and the ground is carpeted with the bones of countless forgotten battles, there grows a wolf whose size defies comprehension, whose strength increases with each passing day until it will rival that of the gods themselves. Fenrir, child of Loki and the giantess Angrboda, was raised among the Geir in Asgard, but the gods, seeing in him the seeds of their own destruction, could not bring themselves to kill one who had lived among them as family. Yet neither could they allow him to grow to his full power unchecked. Picture this magnificent and terrible beast, his fur the color of storm clouds before lightning strikes. The gods' attempt to bind Fenrir reveals the tragic nature of prophecy. They commissioned the dwarves to forge chains that could hold him, but Fenrir, growing suspicious of their motives, agreed to be bound only if one of the gods would place their hand in his mouth as a pledge of good faith. Tyr, god of war and honor, stepped forward knowing full well what would happen. And when the chains proved impossible to break and Fenrir realized he had been deceived, from that moment, bound by magical fetters on a desolate island, Fenrir waits for Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. Fenrir represents the wild that can never be truly tamed, the natural forces that human society attempts to control, but which ultimately resist all attempts at domestication. He is also the beloved enemy, the one who is part of the family yet destined to destroy it, embodying the tragic truth that sometimes love is not enough to prevent disaster, that good intentions can lead to the very outcomes they seek to prevent. Deep beneath the waves that crash against the shores of Midgard, coiled around the roots of the world tree itself, lies another of Loki's monstrous children, a serpent so vast that it encircles the entire earth, its tail touching its own mouth in an endless circle of scales and venom. But when it stirs, its movements cause earthquakes and tidal waves, and the thrashing of its tail can be felt on the farthest shores of the world. This serpent embodies the Norse understanding of the world as a fundamentally unstable place, a realm balanced precariously between order and chaos, where the very ground beneath our feet rests on forces that could, at any moment, shift and bring everything crashing down. The Midgard serpent is woven into the very structure of existence, both supporting the world and threatening to destroy it. The Norse told of how Thor, god of thunder, would fish for this serpent with a hook baited with the head of an ox, and how their battles would shake the foundations of heaven and earth alike. In these encounters, we see the eternal struggle between the forces of protection and destruction. The hammer and the serpent locked in a conflict that can never truly be resolved, because each depends on the other for its existence. Its breath will poison the very sky, turning the air itself into a weapon that kills both gods and mortals alike. Yet, in this final confrontation, Thor will succeed in slaying the beast, only to die himself from the serpent's venom, walking 9 steps before falling, a victory that is simultaneously a defeat, a triumph that costs everything to achieve. In the realm of the dead were the dishonored warriors and those who die of sickness or old age. Rather than in battle make their final journey, there rules a being whose very appearance embodies the Norse understanding of death as both ending and beginning, corruption and transformation. Hel, daughter of Loki and giantess, like her brothers, is a goddess whose body tells the story of mortality itself, half corpse with flesh that shows the blue-black of decay and bones that gleam through rotting skin. Her hall sits in the deepest part of Niflheim, surrounded by walls so high they seem to touch the very vault of heaven. Yet those walls offer no comfort to the souls who dwell within them. For this is a place of neither punishment nor reward. The very name of her hall means sprayed with snowstorms or damp with sleet, evoking the cold and moisture of the grave, the chill that seeps into bones and souls alike. Hel herself is neither cruel nor kind, but simply inexorable, the force that claims all things in their time. The boundary between life and death that cannot be crossed except at the appointed hour. When Balder, most beloved of the gods, died through Loki's trickery, it was to Hel that his soul journeyed, and it was from Hel that the gods sought to ransom him back, offering her anything she might desire in exchange for the return of light to the world. But Hel's price was that all things in creation must weep for Balder, and when one giantess, who was Loki in disguise, refused to shed tears for the dead god, Balder remained in the realm of the dead, and the world grew a little darker, a little closer to its final ending. This story reveals the Norse understanding that death is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be accepted. That some losses cannot be undone, no matter how much love or power we bring to bear against them. These Norse monsters, born in a land where winter could last for years, and where survival depended on accepting that even the gods were mortal, teach us about the courage required to live fully in the face of inevitable endings. They remind us that some battles cannot be won, only fought with honor, that some fears cannot be overcome, only faced with dignity, and that sometimes the greatest heroes are those who continue to protect what they love, even when they know that protection is ultimately doomed to fail. Like the breath of sleeping giants, and in that ancient light, we can almost see the shapes of these cosmic beasts moving through the void, patient as mountains, inevitable as time itself, waiting for the moment when their bonds will break and the final story will begin to unfold. Not in malice, but in fulfillment of the natural order that demands all things must have their ending, so that new things can begin. We understand that the Norse monsters teach us not to fear the end, but to find meaning in the struggle against it. To discover honor not in victory, but in the willingness to stand and fight even when defeat is certain. To see in the twilight of the gods not despair, but the promise that after every ending comes a new beginning, fresh and full of possibility. Egyptian guardians of the afterlife. The northern winds fade as we journey southward now, leaving behind the icebound fjords and frost-covered forests for a land where the sun reigns eternal and supreme, where the rhythm of life has been measured for millennia by the rise and fall of the great river that brings both life and renewal to the desert lands it touches. Here, beneath the endless blue of the Egyptian sky, where pyramids pierce the horizon like geometric mountains, and temples cast shadows that have remained unchanged since the pharaohs walked among mortals. The ancient minds conceived of creatures whose purpose was not destruction but judgment, beings whose terrible forms served not chaos but the ultimate order of cosmic justice. And in their elaborate mythology of the afterlife, they populated the journey of the soul with creatures whose fearsome appearances masked roles as guardians and judges. These were monsters with a purpose, beings whose terror served the greater good, whose very frightfulness was a tool in service of ultimate truth. In the great hall of two truths, where the souls of the dead stand before the scales of justice to have their hearts weighed against the feather of Mat, there waits a creature whose form combines the most feared aspects of three of the Nile's most dangerous predators, a being whose very existence serves as the ultimate deterrent against a life lived without regard for truth and righteousness. Ammit, the devourer of hearts, crouches beside the scales with the patience of eternity itself, her crocodile head resting on massive paws, while her lion's body ripples with contained power, and her hippopotamus hindquarters speak of the crushing weight of final judgment. Picture this creature in the flickering light of the judgment hall, her crocodile jaws lined with teeth like ivory daggers, each one capable of crushing bone as easily as papyrus, her golden eyes reflecting the light of eternal flames that burn without consuming, watching each soul that approaches the scales with the dispassionate attention of perfect justice. She is neither cruel nor kind, but simply necessary. When a heart proves heavier than the feather, weighted down with the sins of a lifetime spent in pursuit of selfish pleasure at the expense of others, Ammit moves with the swift finality of natural law itself, her jaws closing around the heart that has failed its test, consuming not just the organ, but the very essence of the person it represents, ensuring that this soul will never know the peace of the blessed dead nor the possibility of reincarnation, but will simply cease to exist, scattered into the void like dust on the desert wind. Yet, Ammit represents not cruelty, but mercy of the highest order, for she prevents the unworthy from polluting the paradise of the righteous, ensures that the afterlife remains a place of peace and harmony. The Egyptians understood that true compassion sometimes requires harsh action. The crocodile aspect of her nature speaks to the sudden, inescapable nature of divine judgment. The way that reckoning can come without warning to those who have forgotten the moral laws that govern existence. Deep in the twisting passages of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, where the sun god Ra must journey each night to be reborn with the dawn, serpentine forms writhe through darkness so complete that it seems to have weight and substance of its own. Creatures whose purpose is to test and challenge the solar bark on its nightly voyage through the realm of the dead. The serpent, Apep, also known as Apophis, is the greatest of these challenges, a creature of such immense size that its coils could encircle mountains, whose very existence represents the principle of chaos that seeks to return the ordered universe to the primordial darkness from which it emerged. Each night, as Ra's boat carries the sun through the underworld, Apep rises from the depths to do battle with the light. This is not a battle between good and evil in the simple sense, but between two cosmic principles, both necessary for the proper functioning of existence. The serpent's attack takes many forms, sometimes rising like a living tsunami to overwhelm the solar bark with the weight of absolute darkness, sometimes shatterstone, sometimes breathing forth clouds of poisonous darkness that seek to extinguish the divine light forever. Yet each night, through the combined efforts of Ra and his divine crew, augmented by the spells and prayers of the living, who understand their role in maintaining cosmic balance, the serpent is defeated, cut into pieces that regenerate before the next sunset, ensuring that the battle will be fought anew each night for all eternity. This nightly struggle reminds us that order and meaning are not the natural state of things, but achievements that must be continuously maintained through conscious effort. That the light we take for granted during the day exists only because of battles fought in darkness by forces we may never see or understand. The serpent's regeneration speaks to the eternal nature of chaos, the understanding that the forces of dissolution cannot be permanently defeated, but must be faced anew each day with fresh courage and determination. Among the guardian demons of the Duat, there exist beings whose forms shift between human and animal, whose names alone were believed to have power over the living and the dead alike. Creatures like the 42 assessors, who stand as witnesses during the judgment of souls. These beings, with heads of ibises, jackals, falcons, and serpents, represent the penetrating gaze of absolute truth, the understanding that nothing can be hidden from the judgment of the afterlife. Then there are the guardians of the gates beings, whose duty is to challenge every soul that seeks passage deeper into the underworld, demanding passwords and proofs of worthiness that can only be provided by those who have properly prepared for death through ritual knowledge and moral conduct. These creatures, often depicted with human bodies and animal heads, holding knives and staffs of office, embody the Egyptian understanding that the afterlife is not a democracy where all souls are equal, but a hierarchy where advancement depends on wisdom, preparation, and righteousness. The snake-like creatures that guard the caverns of the Duat represent the protective aspects of fear, the way that terror can serve to keep the unworthy from accessing knowledge or power they are not prepared to handle responsibly. Their fearsome appearance and aggressive behavior toward unprepared souls serve the same function as the guardians of ancient temples, ensuring that only those who have demonstrated proper reverence and understanding may proceed to the inner mysteries. Yet for all their terrifying aspects, these creatures of the Egyptian underworld are ultimately servants of justice and order. The delicate structures that allow consciousness and meaning to exist in a universe that tends naturally toward entropy and dissolution. As the desert wind carries the scent of sand and distant water across the eternal monuments that stand like sentinels beneath the wheeling stars, we understand that the Egyptian monsters teach us about the necessity of judgment, the importance of living with awareness that our actions have consequences that extend beyond the boundaries of our mortal existence, that the universe itself has standards that must be met if we are to progress from one level of being to another. The pyramids stand silhouetted against the star-filled sky, their perfect geometric forms a testament to humanity's ability to create order from chaos. We can almost see the forms of ancient guardians, still keeping watch, still ensuring that the balance between order and chaos, between justice and mercy, between fear and hope, remains stable through the turning of the ages. Roman horrors and echoes of Greece. From the timeless sands of Egypt, our journey carries us northward and westward, following trade routes, worn smooth by countless caravans and the sandaled feet of legionaries, until we reach a land where marble columns, like the legs of sleeping giants, and where the very air seems to hum with the memory of power that once commanded half the known world. Here, in the heart of what was once the Roman Empire, we discover monsters that are both familiar and strange, creatures borrowed from conquered peoples, yet transformed by Roman sensibilities, old fears dressed in new forms that reflect the complex nature of a civilization built on absorption and adaptation. The Romans, those master builders and administrators who prided themselves on bringing order to chaos, that even the most fantastic beings somehow reflect the realities of life in an empire where politics could be more dangerous than any mythical beast, where betrayal, war, familiar faces, and death might come from those closest to power, seek shelter before nightfall. The Lamia, once a beautiful queen of Libya, beloved by Zeus himself, was transformed by jealous Hera into something that embodied every parent's worst nightmare, a being whose appearance could shift between that of a seductive woman and a serpentine monster. Picture this creature as she appears in the Roman telling, more complex and tragic than her Greek predecessor, a being whose shape-shifting abilities reflect the Roman understanding that evil often wears the most appealing masks, that those who would harm us frequently approach with smiles and honeyed words rather than claws and fangs. Her lower body writhes with serpentine coils that can crush grown men to powder, yet her torso remains that of a woman of surpassing beauty, her face unmarked by the horror of her condition, except for eyes that cannot close, reflecting the anxieties of an empire built on the subjugation of other peoples, yet dependent on their labor and resources. She represents the terror that those who have been wronged will someday return, seeking vengeance that the victims of imperial expansion, where the protection of the powerful might not extend to those they love most. She approaches homes in the darkest hours before dawn, when even the guards drowse at their posts, taking the form of a beloved nursemaid or a grandmother whose presence would cause no alarm, only revealing her true nature when it is far too late for resistance or flight. How children who remained alert and remembered the warning signs might outwit even this ancient evil, reflecting the Roman belief that intelligence and preparation could overcome even supernatural threats, that the civilized mind could triumph over primitive terrors through the application of reason and will. From the nurseries where Lamia prowled, our path leads us to the shadowy groves outside, its home among the twisted branches of ancient oaks, far from the ordered streets and rational architecture of the urban centers. The Strix, a creature that the Romans inherited from older Italian traditions, yet elaborated into something uniquely their own, was a bird woman whose appearance in the night sky was an omen of death, and whose talons could tear through flesh as easily as her beak. Imagine this creature perched on a gnarled branch, overhanging a moonlit crossroads, her human torso ending in powerful bird legs armed with talons like curved daggers, her arms transformed into wings that beat the air with sounds like distant thunder. Her face beautiful in the classical Roman manner, yet marked by eyes that glow with predatory hunger and a mouth filled with teeth designed for tearing rather than speaking. She embodies the Roman fear of the wild places that still existed at the edges of their ordered world, the understanding that for all their engineering marvels and military might, there remained forces that could not be conquered through conventional means. The Strix hunts not from simple hunger, but from a more complex need, seeking not just flesh, but the vital essence of her victims, the life force that animates the body and gives meaning to existence. Her cry in the night was said to curdle milk and cause pregnant women to miscarry. Her very presence, a blight upon the natural order that the Romans worked so hard to maintain and extend throughout their territories. Yet, she also represents the price of empire, the understanding that expansion and conquest inevitably bring contact with forces that cannot be easily categorized or controlled, that the rational Roman mind must sometimes acknowledge the existence of phenomena that resist explanation through natural philosophy or military strategy. Her origins in pre-Roman Italian folklore remind us that beneath the marble facades and geometric precision of Roman civilization lay older, darker traditions that could not be entirely suppressed or forgotten. In the underground burial chambers, where wealthy Romans laid their dead to rest in stone, sarcophagi decorated with scenes of earthly pleasure and divine judgment, there were said to dwell creatures that the living world had forgotten, but that the dead remembered all too well. The main spirits of the departed, who had not found peace in death, could take corporeal form under certain circumstances, appearing as pale shadows of their former selves, yet possessed of terrible strength and an insatiable hunger for the warmth and vitality of the living. These beings, neither fully alive nor properly dead, embodied Roman anxieties about the proper treatment of the deceased. The understanding that failure to observe the correct funeral rites could result in consequences that extended far beyond mere social disapproval. The Roman manes differed from the simple ghosts of other traditions in their corporeal power and their connection to questions of justice and social order, reflecting the Roman preoccupation with legal precedent and proper procedure, even in matters touching on the supernatural. Who showed disrespect for tradition, or who failed to honor their obligations to family and state? There were said to exist creatures that predated Roman civilization entirely, beings that had lurked in the Italian peninsula since the time when wolves and bears were the most dangerous predators to be found in its forests. These were the larvae, malevolent spirits that had never been human, but that fed upon human fear and suffering, growing stronger and more substantial with each act of terror they inspired. The larvae represented the Roman understanding that some evils were not created by human action, but existed as fundamental aspects of reality, forces that could be controlled but never completely eliminated, managed but never fully understood. They embodied the recognition that even the most rationally organized society must make room for the irrational that even the most powerful empire must acknowledge. As we stand now among the broken columns and weathered statues that mark the ruins of Roman grandeur, watching shadows lengthen across stones that once formed the heart of the greatest empire the world had ever known, we understand that the Roman monsters teach us about the complexity of civilization, the way that progress and order can coexist with ancient terrors. The wind that moves through these ruins carries echoes of 1,000 different voices, the conquered peoples whose own monsters were absorbed into Roman tradition, transformed and retold to serve new purposes, to address new anxieties, to provide new lessons about the price of power and the fragility of the structures we build to protect ourselves from the darkness that always waits at the edges of the light. Mesopotamian demons and ancient terrors. Our journey now takes us even further back in time, following the course of great rivers toward the place where human civilization first learned to write its fears into permanent form, where the very concept of recorded history began among the fertile plains, where the Tigris and Euphrates merge their waters and create the land that the ancients called the cradle of humanity. Here, in what was once Mesopotamia, where ziggurats pierced the sky like man-made mountains and cuneiform tablets preserved humanity's earliest attempts to understand the forces that shaped their world, we encounter monsters of such primal terror that they seem to emerge not from human imagination alone, but from some deeper, more fundamental source of dread. The people of this ancient land, the Sumerians and Babylonians and Assyrians, who built the first cities and wrote the first laws, lived in constant awareness of their vulnerability to forces beyond human control, floods that could sweep away entire settlements, droughts that could turn fertile fields to dust, diseases that could decimate populations without warning or mercy. In response to these realities, they created a mythology populated by demons whose very existence served to explain the inexplicable, to give shape and name to the formless terrors that haunted human existence in its earliest organized forms. From the burning deserts where scorching winds, Pazuzu, with his gaunt human body, marked by ribs that show through skin like leather, stretched over a frame of bone, stands as tall as two men, yet moves with the swift grace of the desert winds, for the infliction of pain rather than the consumption of prey. Upon his head rise horns, like those of a bull, speaking of his connection to the forces of fertility and destruction that the Mesopotamians understood to be two aspects of the same cosmic power, while his body shows the marks of ritual scarification that tell the story of his dominion over the winds that can bring either life-giving rain or comestating sandstorms. Yet Pazuzu, for all his terrifying appearance, was not purely an agent of evil, but a complex figure whose destructive power could be turned against other, more malevolent forces, a demon whose very frightfulness made him an effective protector against creatures even more dangerous than himself. The Mesopotamians understood that the world was not divided into simple categories of good and evil, but was instead populated by forces of varying degrees of danger and usefulness, beings whose terrifying power could serve beneficial purposes when properly approached and controlled. Amulets bearing Pazuzu's image were worn by pregnant women and placed in the rooms of newborn children, not to invoke his wrath, but to enlist his protection against the even more terrible demon Lamashtu, whose hunger for infant flesh and mother's blood made her the most feared of all the creatures that stalked the borderlands between life and death. In this role as protector, Pazuzu embodies the Mesopotamian understanding that survival sometimes requires allying oneself with dangerous forces, that the world is too complex and threatening to allow for the luxury of moral purity. The desert winds that carry Pazuzu's influence across the land also bring whispers of another creature. Lamashtu, daughter of the sky god, Onu, was cast out from heaven for her uncontrollable appetite for destruction, banished to walk the earth as a demon whose primary targets were the most innocent and vulnerable of humanity's children. Newborn infants whose deaths could devastate entire families, and pregnant women whose blood she craved above all other sustenance. Picture this demon as she appears in the flickering light of oil lamps that burn in chambers where new mothers keep vigil through the dangerous first weeks of their children's lives, her naked body marked by the signs of divine punishment, yet still retaining traces of the beauty she possessed before her fall from grace. Her head, that of a lioness with a mane that flows like liquid fire, speaks of her royal origins and her predatory nature, while her hands end in claws capable of tearing through flesh as easily as papyrus, and her feet are those of a bird of prey. Her breasts, which should be sources of nourishment and comfort, instead drip with poison that can kill with a single drop, while from her mouth protrude fangs like those of a viper designed to inject venom that brings not quick death but lingering agony. She rides upon a donkey, symbol of stubbornness and base desires, and in her hands she carries a serpent and a comb. tools that speak of her ability to both kill and seduce, to destroy through violence or through the slower corruption of vanity and pride. Lamishtu's predations, including incantations that must be spoken at specific times and in precise ways. Amulets that must be prepared according to exact specifications and ceremonies that required the participation of entire communities in the defense of their most vulnerable members. The understanding that even the gods are subject to laws and limitations that prevent them from simply destroying what they disapprove of. That banishment rather than annihilation sometimes creates problems worse than those it was meant to solve. Her existence reminds us that good intentions, poorly executed, can have consequences far beyond what their authors intended. That the desire to punish wrongdoing must be balanced against the potential for that punishment to create new forms of suffering. In the depths of the underworld, where the goddess Ereshkigal rules over the spirits of the dead with an iron hand, and the very air is thick with the dust of countless generations. Demons of disease and madness, whose touch can bring about slow dissolution of both body and mind. These are the Udiku beings that exist in a state between life and death, drawing their power from the boundary regions where the living world meets the realm of the dead. Some appear as gaunt humans, whose flesh shows the marks of every disease that has ever afflicted mankind, their bodies serving as living catalogues of human suffering, while others take the forms of animals, twisted into shapes that violate natural law, creatures whose very existence seems to mock the ordered categories that rational minds use to make sense of the world. Their eyes burn with fever light, and their mouths speak words in languages that predate human speech, syllables that carry within them the power to drive listeners to madness or despair. The Udiku represent the Mesopotamian understanding that illness and madness are not merely physical phenomena, but have spiritual dimensions that must be addressed through means other than purely material medicine, that the health of the body depends upon the health of the soul and its relationship to the cosmic forces that govern existence. Their ability to shift form speaks to the protean nature of suffering, the way that pain and fear can take countless different shapes, while remaining essentially the same in their capacity to diminish and destroy human happiness. Yet even these creatures of disease and dissolution serve a purpose in the greater scheme of creation, for they remind the living of their mortality, encourage proper respect for the gods and adherence to the moral laws that maintain social order, and provide tests through which human beings can demonstrate their courage, wisdom, and faith in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. As we stand now beneath the star-filled dome of the Mesopotamian sky, where the same constellations that guided ancient astronomers in their calculations still wheel in their eternal patterns, we can feel the weight of ages pressing down upon us, the accumulated wisdom and terror of humanity's first attempts to understand its place in a cosmos filled with both wonder and horror. The winds that blow across these ancient lands carry echoes of voices speaking in long-dead languages, reciting incantations that were old when the pyramids were young, invoking protections against demons whose names have been whispered in fear for more than 4,000 years. The monsters of Mesopotamia teach us about the fundamental human need to find meaning in suffering, to transform random catastrophe into purposeful challenge, to see in the forces that threaten us not merely obstacles to be overcome, but teachers whose harsh lessons can lead to greater wisdom and strength. They remind us that civilization itself is a fragile achievement, a delicate balance maintained through constant vigilance against the forces of chaos that always press against the boundaries we construct to protect ourselves and those we love. Far Eastern nightmares. The dust of ancient Mesopotamia settles behind us as we turn our steps eastward, following silk roads and mountain passes toward lands where different philosophies shaped different fears, where the boundary between the human and non-human world was understood to be more fluid and permeable, where monsters might be transformed through wisdom and compassion rather than simply destroyed through force. Here, in the misty mountains and bamboo forests of Asia, where temples perch on cliff tops, like meditation made manifest in stone and wood, we encounter creatures that challenge our Western understanding of what monsters are meant to represent, beings that can be both terrifying and benevolent, destructive and protective, depending upon the wisdom and behavior of those who encounter them. The cultures of the Far East, steeped in philosophical traditions that emphasize balance, transformation, and the interconnectedness of all things, created monsters that reflect these deeper understandings of the nature of reality. Here, a creature's moral alignment is not fixed at birth, but can change based on circumstances, teaching, and the accumulated effects of countless disloyal choices, just as human beings can move toward enlightenment or corruption through the paths they choose to walk. From the mist-shrouded lakes and rivers of Japan, where water lilies bloom like white stars on dark surfaces that reflect both sky and secrets, there emerges a creature whose deceptively childlike appearance conceals both great danger and the possibility of unexpected friendship. The Kappa, no taller than a human child, but possessed of strength that can drag grown horses beneath the water's surface, represents the Japanese understanding that the natural world contains forces that must be approached with both respect and caution, beings that can be either ally or enemy, depending upon how they are treated. Picture this creature as it surfaces near a wooden bridge, where travelers pause to rest in the cool shade of willow trees, its reptilian skin glistening with river water that never seems to fully dry its webbed hands and feet, speaking of perfect adaptation to life in both water and on land. Atop its head sits a shallow depression, a natural bowl that must remain filled with water from its home river, for should this ever run dry, the Kappa would lose its supernatural strength and perhaps even its life, a vulnerability that speaks to the creature's deep connection to their aquatic environment. The Kappa's face combines childlike innocence with reptilian alienness, large eyes that seem to hold ancient wisdom, despite their youthful appearance, and a mouth that can stretch wider than seems physically possible, revealing rows of sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh from bone. Yet these same teeth can also speak words of greeting in perfect Japanese. For the Kappa are known to be intelligent creatures capable of learning human customs and language, beings that can engage in conversation, make bargains, and even develop something approaching friendship with humans who treat them with appropriate respect. Japanese folklore tells of Kappa who have been defeated in wrestling matches, yet honored their agreements to cease troubling particular areas of others who have taught humans valuable skills in exchange for offerings of their favorite food, cucumbers prepared in specific ways and offered with proper ceremony. These stories reflect the Japanese understanding that even dangerous spirits can be reasoned with, that wisdom and courtesy can sometimes achieve what force cannot. Yet the kappa also embodies the very real dangers of Japan's waterways. The understanding that rivers and lakes, for all their beauty and necessity, can claim lives with sudden floods, hidden currents, and deceptive depths. Children who drowned while swimming alone were sometimes said to have been pulled down by kappa, an explanation that served both to provide meaning for tragedy and to reinforce important lessons about water safety and the dangers of venturing alone into unfamiliar environments. From the watery realms where kappa dwell, our path leads us up mountainsides covered in dense forests, where ancient trees grow so closely together that even midday becomes twilight beneath their interwoven branches, places where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds grows thin, and creatures of immense power make their homes far from human settlements. Here, in caves that penetrate deep into the living rock of sacred mountains, there dwell beings whose very presence can shake the earth and whose wrath can bring disaster to entire regions. The Oni, often translated as demons or ogres, but more accurately understood as supernatural beings of immense physical and magical power, tower over human beings like living mountains, their skin colored red or blue or black as midnight, their faces dominated by tusks that jut from powerful jaws and eyes that burn with inner fire. Their massive hands, each finger tipped with claws that can tear through steel as easily as silk, carry clubs made from entire tree trunks, wrapped with iron bands, weapons that can shatter stone walls and crush armored warriors with single blows. Yet for all their fearsome appearance and terrible strength, the Oni are not simple forces of destruction, but complex beings whose actions serve important functions in the cosmic order, creatures whose very frightfulness serves to test and strengthen human virtue, whose challenges provide opportunities for heroes to demonstrate courage, wisdom, and compassion. Some Oni are indeed malevolent, using their power to terrorize and destroy, but others serve as guardians of sacred places, protectors of ancient wisdom, or agents of divine justice, who punish those who violate natural law or show disrespect for the spiritual realm. The greatest of these creatures often began as humans who were transformed by extreme emotion or circumstance. Warriors whose rage at injustice became so intense that it literally changed their physical form, or scholars whose pursuit of forbidden knowledge led them across the boundary between human and demon. These transformation stories reflect the Japanese understanding that the line between human and monster is not fixed but permeable, that anyone can become monstrous given sufficient provocation or corruption, just as demons can sometimes be redeemed through proper teaching and compassionate intervention. In Chinese mythology, where the concept of balance between opposing forces shapes every aspect of understanding about the nature of reality, there exist dragons whose power is so vast that they can control the weather itself. Beings whose mood and behavior can mean the difference between bountiful harvests and devastating famines, between gentle rains that nourish crops and floods that sweep away entire cities. These dragons, unlike their Western counterparts, are not simply forces of destruction to be overcome by heroic warriors, but complex beings whose favor must be earned through proper respect and whose anger must be avoided through careful attention to moral and ritual obligations. The Chinese dragon, with its serpentine body that can stretch for miles through clouds and sky, its 4 legs each ending in claws that can grasp mountain peaks or palace towers with equal ease. Its head that combines the features of multiple animals into something both beautiful and terrible. represents the power of nature itself, the understanding that human civilization exists only at the sufferance of forces far greater than any individual or even any nation can hope to control through purely material means. When these dragons rise from their palaces beneath the sea or emerge from caves hidden deep within sacred mountains, their movement through the air can summon typhoons or dispel droughts. Their breath can bring life-giving rain or destructive hail. Their roars can shake the earth and cause rivers to change their courses. Yet they are also beings of great wisdom, possessing knowledge that spans millennia and understanding of cosmic principles that few humans can even begin to comprehend. The relationship between humans and dragons in Chinese culture reflects a sophisticated understanding of humanity's place in the natural order. The recognition that true prosperity comes not from conquering nature, but from learning to work in harmony with its rhythms and requirements. The emperor himself was said to be descended from dragons to carry within his bloodline the same cosmic power that moved through these great beings, a connection that both legitimized his authority and reminded him of his responsibility to serve as a bridge between the human and natural worlds. In the shadowy forests of Korea, where shamans still perform rituals that predate recorded history, and where the spirits of mountains and trees are honored with offerings and prayers, there dwell creatures whose forms shift between human and animal according to their moods and intentions, beings that embody the Korean understanding of the world as a place where transformation is always possible, where nothing remains fixed in its current state forever. The kumiho, a fox spirit that gains additional tails as it grows in age and power, can appear as a beautiful woman whose charm and grace captivate all who see her, or as a nine-tailed fox, whose intelligence and magical abilities rival those of the gods themselves. Like many creatures in Asian mythology, the kumiho is neither purely benevolent nor malevolent, but morally complex, capable of great kindness toward those who treat it with respect and terrible vengeance against those who betray or attempt to harm it. These fox spirits serve as intermediaries between the human and spirit world's beings, whose long lives allow them to accumulate wisdom and perspective that shorter-lived humans cannot achieve yet, whose non-human nature also gives them insights into aspects of reality that human consciousness cannot normally access. They can serve as teachers, lovers, protectors, or destroyers, depending upon the circumstances of their encounters with humanity and the choices made by both parties in those meetings. As we stand now on a mountaintop temple platform, where incense smoke rises like prayers made visible against the star-filled sky, we understand that the monsters of the Far East teach us about the possibility of transformation, the importance of balance, and the recognition that even the most fearsome beings may have something valuable to offer those who approach them with proper respect and understanding. The moon above us, full and bright as a silver mirror, illuminates landscapes that have remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. Mountains and forests were the same spirits that inspired ancient poets and philosophers, still make their homes, still offer their harsh lessons and unexpected gifts to those wise enough to seek them out and humble enough to learn from encounters that challenge every assumption about the nature of reality and the possibilities that exist beyond the boundaries of ordinary human experience. Creatures of the underworld across cultures, our journey through the landscapes of human fear now takes us downward, following paths that lead away from the familiar world of sunlight and seasons, away from the realm where mortal concerns hold sway, descending into the deep places where every culture has imagined the dead make their final journey, where the laws that govern life give way to stranger rules, darker truths, and beings whose very existence challenges our understanding of what it means to be alive, to be conscious, to be human. Here in the spaces between worlds, where the echoes of 1,000 different mythologies converge like underground rivers flowing toward some unimaginable sea, we encounter creatures that serve not merely as obstacles or enemies, but as guardians of thresholds, judges of worthiness, and guides for souls making the transition from one state of being to another. These are beings that embody the universal human need to believe that death is not an ending but a transformation, that the journey continues even after the heart stops beating and the breath grows still. In the shadowed halls where Hades rules over the Greek dead, where the river Styx flows with waters black as midnight and the air itself seems heavy with the weight of eternity, there stands a creature whose very existence serves to define the boundary between life and death, hope and despair, the possibility of return and the finality of separation. Cerberus, the three-headed hound, whose size dwarfs any earthly dog, whose fur is darker than the space between stars, and whose eyes burn with the cold fire of judgment, guards the gates that no living soul should pass and no dead soul should cross in the opposite direction. Picture this magnificent and terrible beast as it rests beside the gates of horn and ivory, its massive body radiating power that could tear apart armed warriors as easily as a mortal dog might dispatch a rabbit, each of its 3 heads, capable of independent thought and action, yet united in purpose and loyalty to its divine master. The left head, they say, sees the past with perfect clarity, understanding every action and decision that brought each soul to this moment of judgment, while the right head perceives the future that awaits the consequences of choices made in life, playing out through the endless cycles of the afterlife. The center head, largest and most terrible of the 3, focuses entirely on the present moment, on the soul that stands before it, seeking passage into the realm of the dead, measuring with infallible accuracy the weight of that soul's deeds, the sincerity of its repentance, the depth of its understanding of what it means to leave the world of the living behind forever. Its voice, when it chooses to speak, carries the authority of death itself, words that can grant passage or deny it with equal finality. Yet Cerberus is not cruel but necessary, not motivated by malice but by duty to a cosmic order that requires clear boundaries between different states of existence. The living who attempt to enter the underworld, creatures caught between states in ways that serve neither their own best interests nor those of the cosmos as a whole, acknowledges its nature and purpose while demonstrating their own worthiness to cross the threshold it guards. Orpheus charmed it with music that spoke to the deepest truths about love and loss, while Heracles overpowered it only temporarily and with Hades' explicit permission, proving that even the greatest physical strength must yield to higher authority when it comes to matters of life and death. In the frozen wastes of Niflheim, where the Norse goddess Hel holds court in a hall built from the bones of giants and roofed with the scales of the Midgard serpent, there exist creatures that embody the Norse understanding of death as neither punishment nor reward, but simply another form of existence, colder and dimmer than life, but not without its own austere beauty and terrible dignity. Here the dead who did not die in battle gather in vast halls where the fires burn with pale flames that give light but no warmth. The Andor corpse shore is patrolled by creatures that were once serpents but have grown to enormous size through feeding on the bodies of oathbreakers and murderers, their scales now tough as armor and their venom potent enough to kill even the already dead, ensuring that these most dishonored souls experience continued suffering appropriate to their crimes, represent true annihilation. The Norse understanding of the afterlife acknowledges that death comes to everyone regardless of their moral standing, that the separation between the honored dead who feast in Valhalla and those who dwell in Hell's realm is based not on virtue but on the manner of their dying. Existence continues but in forms that may be radically different from what they knew in life. Creatures that serve as both executioners of justice and protectors of the cosmic order that makes meaningful existence possible. These are not random monsters, but carefully designed guardians whose every aspect serves a specific function in the complex machinery of divine judgment. The 42 assessors who observe each soul's judgment appear with the heads of various animals, each one representing a different aspect of natural law that must be satisfied before the soul can progress to the blessed afterlife of the field of reeds. The ibis-headed figure examines the soul's relationship to wisdom and learning, ensuring that knowledge was used responsibly and not hoarded selfishly, while the crocodile-headed assessor measures the soul's response to power, determining whether authority was exercised with justice or corrupted by personal ambition, reducing morality to simple categories of good and evil. Their animal heads remind observers that human beings are part of the natural world and subject to the same laws that govern all life of the living, but operates with supernatural efficiency and absolute incorruptibility. There exist judges whose forms reflect their roles as administrators of cosmic justice, beings that combine human understanding with divine authority to ensure that every soul receives exactly the treatment its earthly actions have earned. Preside over courts where the records of every life are examined with meticulous care and infinite patience, operating by similar principles but with supernatural resources and perfect information, creates a unique category of underworld creatures that are essentially divine civil servants, beings whose frightening appearance serves to reinforce the absolute authority of the cosmic law they represent, while their systematic approach to judgment ensures that justice is administered fairly and consistently across all souls, regardless of their earthly status or connections. Populates its underworld realms with creatures that serve primarily as teachers rather than punishers, beings whose terrifying forms are designed to shock souls into recognition of truths they might otherwise refuse to acknowledge. These wrathful deities, with their multiple arms holding symbolic weapons and their faces twisted into expressions of divine fury, represent not malevolence but compassionate intensity. Creatures that are simultaneously external realities and projections of the deceased's own mind, beings whose forms and behavior reflect the psychological and spiritual state of the soul encountering them. This creates a unique category of monsters that are neither purely objective nor purely subjective, manifestations that arise from the interaction between individual consciousness and universal principles of spiritual development. As we stand now at the convergence of these various underworld realms, where the paths taken by souls from different cultures intersect and overlap Like the threads in some cosmic tapestry, we understand that the creatures that guard these deep places serve functions that transcend any particular religious or cultural tradition. The darkness that surrounds us here is not the absence of light, but a different kind of illumination. The stark clarity that comes when all illusions are stripped away, and reality reveals itself in forms that may be terrifying, but are ultimately truthful, showing us aspects of existence that are always present, but normally hidden beneath the comfortable assumptions that make daily life possible. These guardians of the threshold between worlds serve as reminders that transformation is always possible, that endings can also be beginnings, and that even the most fearsome judges may be agents of a compassion so vast and patient that mortal minds can barely comprehend its scope and intention, working through methods that seem harsh, but serve purposes that extend far beyond any individual life or death toward the ultimate flourishing of consciousness itself. The symbol of the monster. As our journey through the shadowed realms of human imagination approaches its conclusion, we find ourselves in a space that exists not in any particular geography, but in the realm of meaning itself, where the creatures we have encountered revealed themselves to be more than mere figments of ancient fancy or primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. Here, in this twilight place where symbol and reality converge, we begin to understand that monsters are not external enemies to be conquered, but mirrors that reflect back to us the deepest truths about what it means to be human in a universe that is both magnificent and terrifying, creative and destructive, meaningful and mysterious, beyond our capacity to fully comprehend. Every monster we have met on this journey carries within its frightening form a kernel of truth about the human condition, a recognition of something that we know but rarely dare to acknowledge in the bright daylight of ordinary consciousness. The Hydra, with its multiplying heads, embodies our recognition that some problems cannot be solved through simple, direct action, that life presents us with challenges that seem to grow more complex the more we struggle against them, difficulties that require not just courage but wisdom, patience, and the willingness to approach conflict from unexpected angles. The Medusa, with her gaze that turns living flesh to stone, represents the paralyzing power of true sight, the terrifying possibility that if we were to see ourselves or our world with complete clarity, without the comforting veils of illusion and self-deception that make daily existence bearable, we might be unable to continue functioning in the ways that society demands of us. Her serpentine hair and tragic beauty remind us that wisdom and suffering are often inseparable, that the deepest truths about existence are frequently those that we are least prepared to face. The monsters of the Norse twilight, those cosmic beasts whose awakening will herald the end of the world itself, speak to our awareness that all things must pass, that even the most powerful structures and beloved institutions will eventually face their moment of dissolution, that the courage required for meaningful existence includes the willingness to continue loving and building and striving, even in the knowledge that everything we create will ultimately return to dust. Their patient waiting for Ragnarok reflects our own relationship with mortality, the way that awareness of death gives urgency and poignancy to every moment of life. The Egyptian guardians, with their roles as judges and devourers, embody our deep need to believe that existence operates according to moral principles, that the universe itself cares about justice and truth. that our choices matter not just for their immediate consequences, but in some larger cosmic sense that extends beyond the boundaries of individual mortality. Their hybrid forms, combining human intelligence with animal power, remind us that we are beings who exist at the intersection of nature and spirit, subject to both physical law and moral obligation. The shape-shifting creatures of Asia, with their ability to transform from benevolent to malevolent, depending upon how they are treated, reflect our understanding that reality itself is malleable, that the world we encounter is shaped not just by objective circumstances, but by our own attitudes, choices, and spiritual development. Their complex moral nature challenges Western tendencies to divide existence into simple categories of good and evil, reminding us that wisdom often lies in embracing paradox and accepting the coexistence of apparently contradictory truths. But perhaps most importantly, monsters serve as vessels for the sacred terror that lies at the heart of authentic spiritual experience. The awe-inspiring recognition that existence itself is far stranger and more mysterious than our rational minds can easily accommodate. They embody the numinous, that quality of divine presence that the theologian Rudolf Otto described as both fascinating and terrifying, attracting and repelling us simultaneously because it represents encounters with aspects of reality that exceed our normal categories of understanding. In this sense, monsters serve a function similar to that of religious ritual or artistic expression, creating safe spaces where we can confront truths about existence that might otherwise overwhelm our capacity to cope with daily life. They allow us to experience the full range of human emotion, including terror, awe, and wonder, without being destroyed by the intensity of these feelings, providing cathartic release that purifies and strengthens the soul rather than simply traumatizing it. The fact that monster stories appear in every human culture, despite the vast differences in environment, technology, and social organization that separate different civilizations, suggests that they respond to needs and fears that are fundamental to the human condition, rather than specific to particular historical circumstances. They represent our species' attempt to come to terms with the basic existential situation in which we find ourselves. Conscious beings capable of imagining possibilities that extend far beyond our physical limitations, yet trapped within mortal bodies that are subject to pain, decay, and death. The monster serves as a projection screen onto which we can cast our fears about loss of control, about the possibility that the universe operates according to principles that are indifferent or hostile to human welfare, about the fragility of the social structures and personal relationships that give our lives meaning and stability. By giving these fears concrete form, we make them manageable, transforming shapeless dread into specific challenges that can be understood, confronted, and potentially overcome. Yet monsters also represent the shadow side of human potential, the recognition that the same capacities for intelligence, creativity, and power that allow us to build civilizations and create art can also be turned toward destructive purposes. That the difference between hero and villain often lies not in inherent nature, but in the choices made when facing difficult circumstances. The transformation stories that appear in so many mythologies, tales of humans who become monsters through corruption or extreme circumstance, serve as warnings about the paths that lead away from our best selves towards something darker and more dangerous. In our contemporary world, where traditional monsters have been largely relegated to the realm of entertainment, we continue to create new forms of mythological terror that reflect modern anxieties about technology, environmental destruction, social collapse, and the loss of meaning in an increasingly complex and impersonal world. Science fiction and horror films, urban legends and conspiracy theories all serve functions similar to those of ancient monster stories, providing frameworks for understanding and coping with fears that might otherwise paralyze us with their intensity and scope. The enduring power of monster stories lies not in their ability to frighten us, but in their capacity to remind us that courage, wisdom, and compassion are not merely personal virtues, but cosmic necessities, qualities that the universe itself requires for the continuation of consciousness and meaning. By facing our fears in the safe space of narrative, we prepare ourselves to face the real challenges that await us in the world beyond story. Equipped with the knowledge that others before us have confronted similar terrors and found ways not just to survive, but to transform their encounters with darkness into sources of light for those who follow. Fading into the darkness, the fire that has accompanied us throughout this long journey through the realms of ancient terror now burns low, its flames dancing more gently as they consume the last of the wood that has sustained them through the darkest hours of the night. The shadows that seemed so threatening at the beginning of our exploration have become familiar, companions no longer harboring unknown dangers, but instead holding within their depths the memory of all the creatures we have encountered, all the truths we have discovered, all the fears we have faced and found ourselves capable of surviving. As dawn approaches somewhere beyond the horizon, painting the eastern sky with the faintest suggestion of light, we find ourselves changed by this journey into darkness, not diminished by our encounters with terror, but somehow enlarged. Our understanding of what it means to be human expanded to include aspects of existence that daylight consciousness normally keeps hidden from view. The monsters that seemed so threatening when we first encountered them have revealed themselves to be teachers rather than enemies, guides who have led us through territories of the soul that we might never have explored without their fearsome invitation. Each culture we have visited, each creature we have faced, has added another layer to our understanding of the complex relationship between fear and wisdom, between terror and transformation, between the darkness that threatens to overwhelm us and the light that emerges when we find the courage to continue despite our uncertainty about what lies ahead. The Greek monsters, with their tragic origins and symbolic meanings, the Norse beasts with their cosmic scope and inevitable destinies, the Egyptian guardians with their roles as judges and protectors, all have contributed to a growing recognition that monsters exist not to destroy us, but to complete us, to provide the shadow that gives depth and meaning to the light. The Mesopotamian demons, with their ancient hunger and their complex relationships to human suffering, have shown us that some fears are so fundamental to the human condition that they persist across millennia, finding new forms and new expressions, while retaining their essential power to challenge and transform those who encounter them. The Asian spirits, with their moral complexity and their potential for both destruction and enlightenment, have taught us that the universe is not divided into simple categories of good and evil, but operates according to principles of balance and transformation that require wisdom and compassion to navigate successfully. The guardians of the underworld, those judges and gatekeepers who stand at the threshold between life and death, have reminded us that every ending contains within it the seeds of new beginning. that transformation is always possible, even in circumstances that seem to offer no hope. That consciousness itself is more resilient and more creative than the physical forms through which it expresses itself. Their terrifying appearance serves to mask a deeper truth about the nature of existence. The recognition that what we fear as destruction may actually be another form of creation, another movement in the endless dance of consciousness, exploring its own possibilities. As we prepare to return to the world of ordinary daylight and familiar concerns, we carry with us the knowledge that the monsters we have encountered exist not only in ancient stories, but in the depths of our own psyche, not as enemies to be eliminated, but as aspects of ourselves that require recognition, integration, and understanding. The shadow that Carl Jung identified as the repressed and denied aspects of personality finds expression in these mythological forms, providing safe ways to encounter and work with the parts of ourselves that we might otherwise prefer to ignore or suppress. The monsters teach us that wholeness requires the inclusion of darkness as well as light, that authenticity demands acknowledgement of our capacity for destruction as well as creation, that wisdom comes not from the elimination of fear, but from learning to dance with it, to use its energy in service of growth and transformation, rather than allowing it to paralyze us with its intensity. They remind us that courage is not the absence of terror, but the willingness to act appropriately despite its presence, to choose love and creation even when destruction seems easier or more immediately satisfying. In our modern world, where the pace of change accelerates beyond human capacity to easily adapt, where technology creates new possibilities for both connection and isolation, where environmental and social challenges seem to grow more complex and threatening with each passing year, the ancient wisdom embedded in monster stories becomes more relevant rather than less. The creatures that once stalked through primordial forests and haunted the dreams of our ancestors continue to speak to fears and hopes that remain constant despite the transformation of their external circumstances. The hydra's multiplying heads remind us that complex problems require systemic solutions, that treating symptoms without addressing root causes often makes situations worse rather than better. Medusa's petrifying gaze speaks to the importance of approaching truth gradually and with proper preparation, of recognizing that some insights are too powerful to be absorbed all at once without risk of psychological or spiritual damage. The Minotaur's labyrinth teaches us that the most important journeys are often interior ones, that the thread that guides us safely through the maze of existence is usually the love and wisdom of others who have walked similar paths before us. The cyclical nature of these stories, their tendency to end where they began, but with the protagonists transformed by their experiences, reflects the spiral rather than linear nature of real growth and development. We do not conquer our monsters once and for all, but encounter them again and again at different levels of understanding each meeting, offering new opportunities for integration and wisdom, each victory revealing new challenges that require even greater courage and skill to address successfully. As the first birds begin to sing in the darkness that precedes dawn, their voices carrying across landscapes that seem familiar yet somehow transformed by our night-long journey through realms of terror and wonder, we understand that the monsters are not disappearing, but returning to their proper place in the ecology of consciousness. retreating to the depths where they wait patiently for the next seeker, who needs their harsh teaching, the next soul, ready to face the darkness within and without, in service of greater understanding and authentic self-knowledge. The fire dies to glowing embers that pulse with their own rhythm like a sleeping heart, and in that gentle light, we see that the world around us remains unchanged, yet we ourselves have been transformed by our willingness to venture into territories that most prefer to avoid, to seek wisdom in places where others see only danger, to discover that the monsters that seem to threaten us from without are often reflections of the fears and potentials that dwell within, waiting to be acknowledged, integrated, and transformed through the alchemy of conscious awareness and compassionate understanding. Sleep comes now as a friend rather than an escape, carrying with it not nightmares but dreams enriched by the depth of our exploration, populated not by terrors that diminish us, but by guides who continue their teaching even in the realm of sleep, helping us to integrate the lessons of our journey and prepare for the continuing adventure of conscious existence in a universe that is both more beautiful and more mysterious than our waking minds can fully comprehend, where monsters and angels dance together in the eternal play of consciousness, discovering itself through every possible form and experience.